Lots going on with NATO. They're doing this big air show. They're trying to argue that they've got all of this unity and stuff like that. But behind the scenes, there seem to be some cracks, some fissures going on. Your thoughts on what's happening with NATO? And I know there's plenty, Scott Ritter.
Excuse me. We'll just start with Air Defender since you brought that up. That's the big NATO air exercise. The I guess it's interesting when you read around Telegram and on Twitter. Even though I'm not a member of Twitter anymore, my wife actually lets me scroll through her Twitter so I can read what people are saying. I am continue to be somewhat angered at Elon Musk for keeping me off that platform for not doing a darn thing wrong. It is what it is. But people are like, NATO is going to use Air Defender as a cover for projecting NATO air power into Ukraine in support of the counteroffensive. And that's part and parcel of the notion that NATO is somehow this all-powerful entity that, can simply it's like Thanos in Avengers, snap your fingers and make 50% of the universe disappear. But I think what we're seeing is the reality is that that this is not what it is. The burning Leopard tanks, the burning Bradleys, the destroyed M777s, the destroyed Caesar platforms, etc., shows that NATO equipment is destroyed every bit as easy as any equipment. That war is a bloody business, and as General Cavoli, the commander of the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, has said, NATO is incapable of imagining the level of violence that's taking place on the ground in Europe. Neither is it capable of imagining the level of violence that would take place in the air over Ukraine should NATO want to get involved in this. Air Defender looks good on paper, but as somebody who's done exercises like this before, participated in, has been monitoring them and their goals and objectives, I'm struck by a couple of things. One, by surging aircraft into German airspace and airfields, this is a huge logistical undertaking. And I'm curious about how much advanced preparation had to be done to make this happen. For instance, if you're going to take an F-35 squadron that isn't normally stationed in Europe and deploy it to Europe, how far in advance did you have to start pre-stocking the spare parts and the unique support aspects of this aircraft? Because you can't be expeditionary if prior to your expedition, you had to spend 6 months getting ready for the exercise. So that's the one thing, is that this is sort of an artificiality. This is an exercise that has been a long time in the planning. This is not a true exercise of expeditionary or warfighting capability. This is an exercise in making things move, positioning things, and then getting them to learn how to operate on the base, getting them to talk to one another. This isn't war. It's not even close to war. Two, a lot of the aircraft sent in were the F-35s. So I'd be interested in learning about what the maintenance to operation ratio is of the F-35. When you deployed all these F-35s from their home base to Germany, how many of them retained operational status upon landing or had to be pulled aside to have things happen to get them back up to speed? What is the impact? How much tempo are the F-35s going to be put in? Are they going to put into a warlike tempo where they're constantly put in the air? And if so, I'd like to know what their stress rate is. But the point is, they won't be tested like that because we can't afford to test them like that. Because if we did test them like that, all the squadrons would be non-operational afterwards, which is the reality if the F-35 ever does go to war against a peer-level opponent like Russia that is going to stress them 24/7. The F-35 is an unsustainable combat platform, and Air Defender proves it by not exercising it. Questions such as, how much fuel does all this take? And, where did it all come from? Did you have to build up fuel stocks to do this? And once you burn through the fuel, do you have sufficient fuel in the end to, for instance, go to war? Are you going to run out of aviation fuel halfway through because you haven't been preparing for this kind of war? You don't have massive stockpiles of this. Your peacetime military operates on a budget, which means, like anybody who operates on a budget, You only buy the gas you need. You don't go around, especially when gas prices are high, buying a whole bunch of gas just to keep it sitting there. So you buy sufficient gas to keep the plane sorting, but you're not ready for war because that means you have to go full time and you will run out of gas. The other thing you're going to run out of is bombs. How many bombs does NATO have in its inventory right now? You know, the Air Force, it drops bombs on targets. How many bombs do they have? Remember, General Cavoli, the scope and scale of the violence is beyond imagination. That means NATO hasn't been imagining this. They haven't been this. So where are the bombs? They don't exist. How about air-to-air missiles? You know, back in the 1980s, when NATO was preparing for a conflict with the Soviet Union, one of the big secrets of it was we would run out of air-to-air missiles within the first week of a war because we just didn't have enough. And guess what? It's even worse today. If we got into a high rate of operation conflict with Russia, we would run out of air-to-air missiles. We would run out of aircraft. We would run out of everything because we're not ready for this. And that's what Air Defender proves. The reality is when you take a look at the Air Defender exercise, when it's all said and done, it's going to show that NATO is not ready for a major conflict with Russia. And there's no way that NATO could do this. The other thing that will be unspoken about this is that there's no air defense for Air Defender. And so all of the muscle flexing that they're doing right now is done in a peacetime environment with no enemy bombing the living dog poop out of them. Again, back in the day, I just remember the exercises that take place where I lived in Germany, Simbach Airfield. They would come in and they would actually put a sortie of around 40 aircraft attacking the airfield, and then they would damage the airfield like it would be in war. And then you had to come in and actually repair the airfield and do that and get the airplanes flying instantly, because that's what war is. War is about getting the crap blown out of your airfield and turning it around and having planes continue to sortie because you need to keep that going. How many airfields are going to be blown up in Germany this time around? What's their airfield repair capability? Because they're going to need it because they don't have any air defense. None whatsoever. And what they do have doesn't work. How do we know that? Just ask the Patriot battery people operating in Ukraine today, or the Iris-T people, or the NASAMS people. It isn't. So Air Defender is an absolute joke. And it just exposes the frailty of NATO. Now, that's not a bad thing to do if you have the ability to move forward and act on that. But they talk about NATO unity, and we've talked about that. There's a couple things. Sweden and Finland were invited to join NATO last May in Madrid, formal invitation. And Finland actually joined in April of this year. They got it. But Turkey has put the kibosh on the Swedish membership, citing what it says is the incompatibility of Sweden's embrace of Kurdish separatists that the Kurds, who are going to be their allies, say are terrorists. And the Turks are saying, we can't allow you into an alliance when you support people that we view as the enemy, existential enemy. In Sweden, they tried in June 1st, they passed certain laws to try and enable prosecution. Indeed, they are putting charges against a Kurd who is sought to embezzle funds to support the Kurdish separatists. And there is talk about the deportation of a non-Swedish citizen Kurd to Turkey on charges of terrorism. That's not enough. Erdogan said you have to do so much more, and Sweden's incapable of it. And Erdogan, I think just this morning, said there ain't going to be Swedish membership in NATO anytime soon. So that's a downer for NATO, for this great show of unity. The United States has sanctioned Hungary, a NATO member, by the way, but we've sanctioned them. We're not providing them with missiles because we're unhappy with things that Hungary has done. How's that for unity? And I know last May, Jens Stoltenberg said NATO's got this new strategic vision that includes reaching out to the Pacific. We've talked about this, the NATO outreach to the Pacific. And in earlier this year, Stoltenberg said we're going to be opening up a liaison office in Japan to better enable NATO, coordinate with the Japanese, the Australians, the New Zealand, our partners in the Pacific. And they were getting ready to do that in time for this NATO summit, which, by the way, Japan and South Korea have been invited to attend, except NATO unity. France said no. France, and we knew France was doing this back when Macron visited China earlier this spring. He said that he didn't want Europe to become a vassal of the United States, to be held prisoner to, the potential conflict between the United States and China. That they didn't want that. That Europe needed to get its own sovereignty when it comes to its policies. And I think there's a recognition that NATO, on its own volition, would not go to the Pacific. That it's only happening because the United States is pushing it on them. And France has come out and said that when we speak of NATO, we're speaking of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and the charter limits us to the North Atlantic, and the Pacific is not the North Atlantic, and therefore we will not support the opening of a liaison office in Japan because we don't want to be involved in provoking China unnecessarily. So that's another downer for NATO going into this. And then the biggest downer of all will be the counteroffensive, but I'm sure we'll talk about that separately.
I wanted to ask you about the this business about air defense, in that I felt that when the U.S. put the Patriot missile in, which is our pride and joy. I mean, it has the name Patriot. How scary is that, right? It's on top of things. It's probably got eagles and it's painted red, white, and blue. Looks great from a PR perspective. It lasted like an hour. They stuck it in and they turned it on, and a Kinzhal missile found it. And I thought, that tells me that if there were a conflict such as they're practicing in Eastern Europe, after the first hour, what would they have? I mean, and if you have no air defense in this day and age, you're in deep and serious trouble. You lose in 24 hours with no air defense, because that wouldn't be a special military operation. There would be no holds barred there. There'd be salvos. If you have no air defense, how do you have even one Air Force base? What happened, or did they already know? But when that Patriot missile battery turned on and it was gone, it seems to me like that was a significant turning point in military relations between Russia and even China and NATO, because it exposed a significant weakness, being that NATO's air defense systems are significantly behind definitely Russia's. I don't even know what China has, but China has S-400, so whatever. Anyway, your thoughts, the Patriot battery disappearing, what's that mean?
Well, first of all, we have to understand what the Patriot is and what the Patriot isn't. The Patriot is one of the greatest propaganda exercises run by the United States. The Patriot system, the system has its roots in, I think, what was called the Safeguard system. The Safeguard was the anti-ballistic missile defense system that the United States was seeking to build in the late 1960s, early 1970s to protect us from Soviet missiles. And a key aspect of Safeguard was its automation. Mm-hmm. Basically, that you could just turn it on and it would automatically discriminate and fire and intercept and take the thinking out of it.
Skynet.
People were there just to basically, push a button, maintain it, keep it running. But we didn't want the brain working, because these were decisions that had to be made quickly. And so when Skynet, went the way of the dinosaur because of or Safeguard, not Skynet.
Terminator here. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll be back. When Safeguard went the way of the dinosaur because of the anti-ballistic missile treaty, the technology, though, as we always see with defense contractors, they had spent a lot of money developing this automated this automated system. And so what they said is, we're going to take this and we're going to apply it to the next generation of air defense systems. And this became the Patriot. And the Patriot basically incorporated Skynet computers and Skynet algorithms and things of that nature.
Where you're saying Skynet, but you mean whatever that
is. I mean, a Safeguard. Guys, see, you did it to me.
I messed up.
That idea. And my simplistic Marine brain catches on to the last thing it heard. So Safeguard. But we'll stick with Patriot now, because we've transitioned.
Okay.
And to the best of my knowledge, the Terminator movie didn't have a fancy P word for anything like that. So, so the Patriot is developed, and it's sold as this miracle weapon that is going to guarantee, Western defense of its airspace. And it was tested in 1991 during the Gulf War. the Patriot system saw its first combat deployment, and it was tested in a demanding scenario, which was a anti-ballistic missile scenario, and it failed egregiously. I mean, I'm writing about this now. Even to this day, medals were issued to Patriot Battery members on, I think, the first night of the war when they, in Dhahran, they fired Patriot missiles because it was an automatic system. And it went, fired it, and they went, holy cow, yeah, we had a missile track, but we shot down the first Scuds. And everybody's going, but there wasn't any Scuds launched, but we shot down, and they gave medals to people for shooting down the first Scud. That tells you what's going on here. It's all a lie. The system had a glitch. It basically, when AWACS went up there and flooded the area with electronic signals, the radar didn't know how to handle the density of the signal, and it interpreted it as an incoming missile track. And because it was on automatic mode, it went fired, and there went a bunch of missiles. Now, in the battle for Riyadh, when the Iraqis started firing Scud missiles against Riyadh, and you had Patriot batteries defending in depth, the village, the city, the airfield. Again, one of the problems is as the actual missiles came in, it's on automatic mode, so it's going, pop, 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 and you're firing a whole bunch of missiles up against this target. And one of the reasons is that the Scud missiles that came in, it broke because it was a Scud missile. The Iraqis elongated it to the Al Hussein so they could put more fuel in it. But as the fuel emptied out, the airframe became unstable because it wasn't designed to be that long, and it started breaking up. The engine compartment would break off. Then the warhead would break off by the guides. And now you have these three pieces coming in, and they're not aerodynamically sound, so they're doing this. And so you got three things doing this and separating, and the radar's going, holy cow, we got 1 million targets. They start shooting off missiles at all because it's not designed to go against something that maneuvers like this. Now, the Iraqis didn't realize it, but they had invented perfect missile system to defeat the air defense because it was coming at higher speeds than it's normally. So the Patriot takes off, it'll fire because it's tracking the missile. Let me get over here. So the missile's coming in, the Patriot will take off, but because the missile's going faster, the Patriot has to readjust. So it has this S movement. So it fires. Now it has to readjust to the target. So an S movement to readjust. But because the thing's moving so fast, the Patriot fires, and the S movement becomes an inverted U movement, meaning boom, hits the ground and blows up. More damage was done to Riyadh by Patriots impacting Riyadh than by Scuds impacting Riyadh. More damage was done to Tel Aviv by Patriots impacting Tel Aviv because they fire, do that S, hit the ground, boom. Patriot doesn't work. It wasn't able to do this. The Israelis had this system. They had trained people at Fort Bliss. They brought the system in, and the Americans wanted them to go on full auto mode. But the Israelis were looking at what's happening in Riyadh, and they're taking the initial attacks to Israel, and they went, no. So they went to manual mode to try and insert, but the Israelis weren't trained sufficiently on this. And the long story short is, even when the Americans finally went to manual mode, we had to, because we had to stop shooting so many missiles because it got ridiculous. You're shooting 6, 7 missiles to a target. That's unsustainable. So we had to go to manual, so we're only popping off 1 or 2 missiles. But even with manual mode, the system, we didn't hit a single Scud. That's the reality of it. We didn't hit a single Scud. Every Scud that was launched went to where God intended it to go. It's not a very accurate system, but it was basically, it fired, gravity took over, and the laws of physics, and it landed where it landed, and the Patriot had nothing to do with that. A lot of the Patriot kills were what they called an impact kill, because the Patriot would go up and go boom, and then we would pretend to think we knew where the missile was going to hit. We'd say, because it landed outside of Riyadh, our missile deflected it. No, it didn't. It wasn't going to land in Riyadh because it's inaccurate to begin with. It did what it did. The Patriot didn't stop it. The And the other thing is it continually had glitches in the radar. It false radar tracks. It is a problematic system at best. It was an absolute disaster as an air defense system during the Gulf War. It didn't work at all. But that's not, we weren't allowed to tell the truth. Wouldn't it be nice if we were actually honest and went, hey guys, that system that we spent a whole bunch of money developing doesn't work. And because we care about the security of the United States, we need to start over. The Patriot is done. Raytheon, I'm sorry, guys, you built a lemon. But instead, George Bush goes to Raytheon, you have saved the West. The Patriot is a scud killer. It's the best weapon system the world's ever seen. And we want to sell it to everybody. Everybody buy the Patriot. Saudi Arabia, buy the Patriot. Everybody buy the Patriot. And they did. People bought the Patriot. It doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. It's not a good system. It's overly complicated. You know, the S-400 system that you talked about, the Soviet analog, actually, it's a much better system. I think it uses 30 men to man the battery, 90 for the Patriot. Why do you need 3 times as many people? Because it's an overly complicated system with lots of moving parts, all of which have to work together to make it function properly, and it doesn't function properly. It's not a good system. During the 2003 conflict, it shot down more Allied aircraft than it shot down Iraqi missiles. The Patriot was not able to defend Saudi Arabian oil infrastructure from Houthi missile attack or Houthi drone attack. This is just a statement of fact. And what we saw now is you tried to take Ukrainians, train them up on the Patriot. It takes a long time to train a Patriot operator. And when you leave school, the school teaches you the school solution. Now you have to get down to the unit where you have to be constantly trained on manual override because the Army doesn't use the Patriot full automatic mode because it doesn't work. But we know that. But we trained the Ukrainians on full automatic mode because that's all we had time to do. We didn't have time to teach them how to override and take manual control and do all that. So the Ukrainians come in, plug it in, turn it on and go, we're ready. And the Russians went, no, you're not. And they came in, they flooded the zone, and you see it with the videotape. Full automatic mode, incoming missile from a distance. Pop, pop. Off it goes. Didn't get it. Pop, pop. As the missile comes in closer, pop, 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 pop. And as it comes in closer, pop, 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 pop. Shot the whole wad. 32 rockets, gone. Didn't hit anything. Boom! Patriot taken out. Welcome to the realities of modern war. Patriot system doesn't work. Neither does the IRIS-T. Neither does anything we brought in. None of it works. It's all overhyped because we haven't been preparing for a real peer level confrontation. You know, we haven't been preparing to be inundated with not only the numbers the Russians will bring to bear, but the quality. And we are stuck. Every one of our weapons and systems is stuck in the past because our defense contractors are criminals. And what I mean by that is they don't want to build the best system for defending America. They want to build the most expensive system for making their profits. Their whole goal is profit oriented. And so they are going to do that which maximizes their ability to make profits. They aren't going to recognize that that factory that they built to build thing X, X is a piece of crap. But in order to change that, you'd have to change out the whole factory. That's a multi-billion-dollar investment. We ain't going to do that because we're about the bottom line. We're not about helping American soldiers or Marines. We don't care about them. We pretend to. We wrap ourselves in the flag, but all we want is the dollars. So we will continue to push bad technology, inferior technology on the Department of Defense, which, because it's all about this relationship with the military-industrial complex, you know, you can't be Lloyd Austin getting a seat at the Raytheon board when you retire if, while you were a 4-star general, you told Raytheon to pound sand, get the hell out of my office, and give me a system that works. That's what he should have done. But then if you do that, you don't get to sit on the board. So instead, he continued this nonsense of putting systems out there that don't work. We have been allowing garbage to be repackaged and sold as garbage, to repackaged and sold as garbage forever. And it's not just in this, it's in every weapon system out there. None of it works. None of it works. Not the way it's intended. Ask yourself, The JDAM bomb. I mean, almost any special operator, almost any JTAC, Joint Tactical Air Controller, would have told you that there's problems with this system. It works in Afghanistan if everything goes right. But, you have to sit there and you have to send a signal from the ground to the aircraft, which then programs in the satellite coordinates into the bomb and then drops the bomb, which is receiving signals from satellites. Now, your average Taliban is sitting there going, I'm picking my nose and watching my goats. And so he gets blown up. But your average Russian ain't your average Taliban. First of all, they're sitting there going, we got signals going from the ground up to the airplane, jam them. Boom, jam the signal, disrupt the signal, do something, break that. Then it gets to the airplane, and we're going to fry those electronics too. And then you drop it, we're going to shut them down so it goes dumb. JDAM doesn't work. We provided a bunch of JDAM bombs to the Ukrainians. They just don't work. Gone. And that's our entire approach to war, air to ground, precision munition. The precision advantage, you read all the articles about it, the precision advantage, this is how we're going to win because we are precise. We're not precise when the bomb doesn't hit the ground. It's the same thing with every weapon system we have. None of them work. HIMARS, supposed to be the big game changer out there. Well, the Russians are shooting them down. 8 out of 10 get shot down. The other ones, if they have a GPS signal, get jammed, so they're going stupid. Every once in a while, one gets through and hits, and there's a problem. Storm Shadow. I guess one got through, hit a command post, killed a big Russian general. That's war, man. Sometimes bad stuff happens. But the vast majority of the Storm Shadow cruise missiles, which are British systems provided to Ukrainians that are launched, are shot down by the Russians because it ain't that good. We don't have anything out there that can beat the Russians the way that we've advertised it. We're supposed to come in with full spectrum dominance. That's the American way of war. We dominate everything. The fact of the matter is we dominate nothing, which means that at the end of the day, we're going to have to get into vehicles close with the enemy and do it the old-fashioned way. And what we're seeing right now on the battlefield is the Russians do old-fashioned better than we do.
Yeah, I remember I was watching something, and they were showing that the Russian artillery, and they were showing these artillery things, and they were saying they pulled artillery from the 1940s and 50s out and put it on the battlefield, and that's what they were using. And I thought to myself, well, you sure can't hack that, can you? You can't hack that stuff. They like load around in there and they yank on the lanyard and boom, it's gone. And I thought, well, any way you look at it, that round's going down range and it's going to land somewhere, or wherever it lands, the other people wherever it lands, nobody's going to be happy. So there is an argument to be made for old school yanking on a lanyard from something from the 1950s.
The mortars, the Russians, and I remember watching this with Special Forces guys, American Special Forces. They're special. They're really good. I mean, that's why we call them Special Forces. Really special guys. And they're watching the Russians, and of course the Russians bring out their tube, and it's just a simple tube. They bring out their mortar shell. It's a simple shell, and then they wrap. They have their pellet. They come in bags, and so they're wrapping bags and they're tying it by hand on there, and they're going, "What the hell is that? My God, look at it. I thought these guys were supposed to be good. Look at that Joe Rabbit." Because we, of course, have big, we have donuts. So package nights and all that stuff. And the Russians put it in there and down, fire it off. And like you said, it goes down range, the desired range, hits the target, blows it up. Meanwhile, we got our tube with our stuff and we're, oh, wait, stop. Got to maintain it. Didn't do it right. All that stuff. The bottom line is, don't make fun of the Russians because they may not look like we do. They may not have the sexy look, the low drag look, and all that kind of stuff. Their stuff works, and it's working now. It's going to always work. It will never fail. And when it does fail, you have some Russian guy come out with a sledgehammer, bam, hit it. It works now. Right. Boom, boom, boom. They just don't. The West doesn't know how to fight a real war. We're too used to fighting on a training field or fighting in a low-intensity environment where if it doesn't work, we can replace it without fear of artillery landing down on us. Don't make fun of the Russians. Their stuff may not look as cool as ours or as low drag as ours, but it works every time when it needs to work. Go ask the Ukrainians how happy they are with the reliability of the weapon systems that the West has been providing them. They're not happy at all. Most Ukrainians are going, screw the Leopard, excuse my language. Give me the T-64, give me the T-72. because we know that when we hit the ignition button, it's going to start. We know when we have it, want it to do something, it's going to do it. We don't have to worry about whether or not this finicky West German or German tank is going to do what we want it to do, or hiccup at the wrong time, right when the Russians with their T-90 and T-80 have us in the sights, bang. And the other thing to ask people is, if the Leopard's so good, why did the Ukrainians strip off the German reactive armor and put Russian reactive armor on top of it? I mean, the Leopard's supposed to be that good, because it ain't any good. It's a death trap.
Well, I'm getting ready. Well, I'll say this. I made the mistake when I was younger of getting a BMW. Let me tell you, when everybody may like BMWs, I had a couple of them, and I'll say this: when they're running right, there is nothing sweeter to drive on the road. But it's like I was a hovercraft pilot. We had an engineer. We had a saying about hovercrafts: there's always something broke. It's just a matter of finding it. Right? That's where that BMW. It was fine. It was too finely and tightly engineered. You know what I mean? So something was always a little fuse, a little this, a little that. And so you always had some kind of a problem. When you had it right, you had a good machine. But how often did you have it right? At any rate, we're getting ready to jump over to we're going to jump over to Rockfin. As you all know, who've been following me for a while, we've done half the show already on all platforms, because I enjoy everybody, having the opportunity to listen to Scott and hear what he has to say. We're going to now talk about the counteroffensive. This is going to turn into my Rockfin exclusive show for subscribers that I do weekly. I want to thank everybody for being on here, and we stayed as long as we could, but now we got to jump to Rockfin, because the subscribers at Rockfin have a right to get their exclusive show. Even they're getting 50% of it today. At any rate, so we're moving over to Rockfin. It costs nothing. You can become a member of Rockfin if you can afford it. Become a subscriber on Rockfin, and you'll get the full show for Scott every week. This is the subscriber only show. It costs $14.99 a month to be a subscriber on Rockfin. And if you sign up for a year, they give you a couple of free months. So it comes to like $12.40. Other than that, if you can't, just become a member. And Rockfin's great free speech platform, no censorship, no advertisements. And I suggest that everyone who's on YouTube should have that, because they do censor us, and at some point they could throw us all off. So we're jumping over to Rockfin. Thanks a lot. And everyone, if you can, become a Rockfin subscriber. All right, first we are getting rid